if we have a lion in the room, and it's just sitting over there, hanging out, minding its own business, and then we bring a rabbit into the room, and we tell the rabbit, do not attack the lion. We put the rabbit down, and then the rabbit decides not to attack the lion. Let's just say they understand English. Would we look at that rabbit and say, wow, you're virtuous. What a good rabbit. No, why not? You all shook your head no, not me. I'm asking you, and you bunch of you shook your heads no. Why don't you tell me?
Because it's prey.
Because what?
Because it's prey.
Explain.
Like the lion is prey, and he's just doing what he's supposed to do.
What happens to the rabbit if he attacks the lion?
Mostly get munched on.
He gets munched on. He dies. So this rabbit stands zero chance. So do we look at that rabbit and say, wow, you are so virtuous for not attacking the lion, and pet it and tell it how brave it is and how wonderful it is? No, I hope not, anyway. If the lion decides not to attack the rabbit, is the lion virtuous in a human sense? Yeah, because the lion is capable of killing this rabbit, and it chooses not to. It decides against doing something that it's capable of. And so he's talking about the weaklings. A weakling is not just a person who's weak. It's beyond that. It's somebody who's frail. And I mean, think about like some like 85-pound beta cuck who's sitting there with arms like this, who wears shirts like I don't know, like the future is female or something like that, and it's just like, violence is never the answer. Well, why would they say that? What would happen if they chose violence? Much like the rabbit, they would die. They would die. So do you sit there and tell that person, wow, you are so virtuous for saying that violence is never the answer? And by the way, if anybody here says that to me, like violence is never the answer, war is never the answer, just let me know if you really believe that. Because if so, just get your wallets and stuff out and get them ready now. Because I'm going to come around and I'm going to take all your money. Because what are you going to do, fight back? Well, I will, you know what? I'm going to be bigger. I'm going to call the police to come and fight for me. So you don't really believe that violence is never the answer. You would just rather not do it yourself. And then you mask it behind, well, I'm going to be the bigger person. Well, bigger in what sense? You mean bigger person? Well, no, the bigger character. That's the bigger character? How's that the bigger character? Well, because I'm being more mature. Oh, now we're just spinning in circles. And you'll notice that when I start asking those questions, well, what do we mean by be better? What do we mean by be bigger? What do we mean by being more mature? You're going to find, strangely enough, that those kinds of statements seem to benefit people who aren't capable of doing anything back. That's why I asked that question earlier. Do you believe, like if you look at our APs here, how many of them do you think that if somebody punched them in the face, they would punch them back in real life? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how many of them would do it. I got one person I'm thinking of in my mind. I think that when they got done crying, they might start swinging one of the APs. But and by the way, I mean that literally. I don't mean that like as a pejorative. I mean that seriously. We hear that from teachers all the time also. But how many of your teachers do you think, if they got punched in the face, would punch somebody back if they were outside of here?
You're my teacher, I bet you would.
Oh yeah, because I do that. But besides me, of course. But think about other teachers. Now I wonder how many of those teachers would tell you, do the right thing, get help. Go find an adult because you must be the bigger and more mature person. And then we all sit there, and then like the rest of us who can't throw a punch, like, oh, what a great idea. What would happen if most of them threw a punch in the street? They just might die, depending on who punched them first. But there's something that happens to us as we're growing up and we get older. We confuse getting older with being more mature, but we confuse this idea with somehow, some way, now violence is never the answer. Now, is violence ever the answer? I hope anyway that we can all agree, yes, at some point it is. At some point it is. I mean, if you're going back to the 1930s and then Hitler's doing what he's doing and the Nazis are rampaging all over Europe, I wonder, do you really think that if we sat down with Hitler and addressed his felt needs through a pure mediation process, that would have solved all of the world's problems? You think if we just sat down, we're like, so I understand. You want to be a painter. I see you. and use all these catchphrases that Hitler would go, I feel seen. I'm gonna stop killing Jews. I'm gonna stop this whole World War madness. You're right, thank you. No, I don't think so. In fact, I think that if you did that, he would probably attack you and kill you because you're demonstrating weakness. Sometimes you have to demonstrate strength. You have to be capable of terrible things. Not because you should go around doing terrible things, but unless you're capable of doing terrible things, well then, who's going to rule the world? Monsters. If there are no monster slayers out there, then monsters are going to run wild. You have to have a monster inside you in order to defeat monsters. But if there are no monsters, well then who is it? And this is why, like I said earlier, people who think that violence is never the answer, well, okay, but you're going to get robbed. But if that happens, I'll call the police because in a well-ordered society, that's how you should live. Isn't it strange how this stuff always seems to benefit weak people? All these ideas about being better, being bigger, being more mature, that these always seem to benefit weak people. And why is that the case? Because as we move more into cities, as we move more out of nature and more into cities, what you're probably going to find is that the number of weak people is multiplying. In other words, the safer that a society is generally, the more weak people are there because weak people are able to survive in safe societies. Most people, if you take them out of the city and we put them in a state of nature, most people are not going to survive.
Yep, they won't.
Yeah, in fact, even that. How about The Purge? You guys like The Purge movies? You remove law enforcement, you remove all police, and you let people kind of do whatever they want to do. What do people start to do?
Murder.
Yeah, murder. I mean, look at riot scenarios. What happens when all of a sudden you look around like, oh, the police won't stop us from doing whatever we want to do? How many of us sit there and go, so we can do whatever we want? Yeah. All right, let's sit in a circle and share our feelings. You notice how that doesn't happen? We say, oh, we can do whatever we want to do? Yeah, let's go burn that place down. Well, actually, let's loot it first, and then we'll burn it down. Okay, done.
Burglary, then arson.
Yeah, burglary, then arson. Get the order correct. The worst thing you want to do is be burglarizing while there's an arson going on. That is just amateur hour. You want to get the order correct. But there are people who will insist that the softer way of doing things is the more mature. They'll attach these virtues to it. And that's because what you're going to find is that weak people, in order to kind of just psychologically exist in the world, they have to redefine these things. Normally we would sit here and say, be better. What does that mean? Oh, it means to not punch back, be more mature. So what we used to call weak, what we've always called weak because we've understood to be weak, is no longer called weak. Now it's called good. So you completely invert what's good. Now, why is it good to punch back? Because if it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. It's like when you see a criminal, and you see someone carjack. What's the chances that that's the first time they've ever committed a crime? Probably not. There's probably a long road of things that took a person to the point that happens. When people get to extremely bad behavior, there are probably lots and lots and lots of places all along the way. And if you demonstrate weakness, what you get is you get monsters acting more like monsters. And that becomes really dangerous for everybody who's in a society. If you look at, for example, going back to the example for World War II, when the whole thing kicks off because Germany invades this area called the Rhineland, which is this area that they're not supposed to be in. When Germany sends in their soldiers, it's really interesting. They send in horses, guys on horseback. They don't send in artillery. They don't send in they don't send in tanks. They send in essentially.
This was before Blitzkrieg, right?
No, this was as it was starting. But what happens is you sit there and go, I don't know if Europe's going to fight back, because if they do, we're dead. We don't have the capacity. So the idea was put some soldiers over there, the ones we can stand to lose. Because that way, if we go after the Rhineland and then Europe responds to it, well then we'll lose people that we're okay with losing, if that makes sense. Just like your old equipment, just in case it gets destroyed. But then when they went in the Rhineland, Europe's response to it was, "You're not supposed to do this," and Hitler's like, "Yeah, what's up?" And they're like, "All right, let's get together and talk about this." Then they get together and they talk about it, and they go, "Okay, You promise you're going to stop there? And he's like, uh-huh. You go, okay. At that point, he said, Hitler himself said, that's when I realized that they didn't have the will to fight. That Europe didn't have the will to fight back. They had the belief system in place. Oh yeah, it's wrong to break these treaties. It's wrong to threaten the whole continent. But they didn't have the will to do it. It's one thing to say we have our freedoms that we believe in. It's another thing to be willing, have the will to fight for the things that you believe in. And so weaklings very well might have very strong beliefs. Not generally, but they might. And they might, virtue signal, say things like violence is never the answer. We should always talk things out. And these are nice ideas, and it's a good idea to talk things out. The more that you're doing this, the less that you're doing this. And the more that you're doing this, the less you're doing this. It's hard to do both at the same time. And it's better to talk than it is to kill. Of course. But to have the capacity for harm, so that your words mean something. If you don't have the capacity for harm, why on earth would anybody listen to you? In fact, why on earth would a monster listen to you? You have to have both. And yet, there are people who don't have the capacity for harm who will think that they're good because they don't have claws. They don't have the ability to fight. And it doesn't have to just mean physically fight. Of course, there's lots of ways that you can fight. But there are lots of ways that you can fight. I was talking in this class, probably the first, maybe even the second week of class, where I was saying that all the people in this row right here, man, I hope that you guys are capable of terrible, terrible things. Because if something were to come through that door aggressively, this is either the martyrs row or the heroes row. I don't know which. We'll find out when it happens. But if danger all of a sudden comes to the door and you're like, ah.
Oh no!
Yeah.
We're
and you
done
go,
for.
And right before you cover, you go, violence is never the answer. And you cover back up, and then we're all, he died being brave. I don't know if that's brave. It's like, this sounds terrible, but be charitable as I explain it to you. You guys remember the Sandy Hook? You guys remember this? Nobody? There was a school shooting not too long ago, man. It was in an elementary school. And this dude went in, and it was bad, man. He killed, 20-something kids if you look it up? The teacher, who was in this one particular classroom, the kids were hiding in a closet. As the guy came in, the teacher jumped between the gunman and the kids. And so he killed her. And we can sit there and go, that's hero. So after he shot her, what did he do? He opened the closet and killed all the kids, one by one. Shot them all in the head. This was a guy who, at his house, he was just like, I don't know how you say it, man. This dude was not good in the head. At his house, he had a scoreboard of all the most famous mass shootings. And their names and their kill counts, kind of like Call of Duty between rounds, where it tallies up all the kills. He had one. He had one of those built in his house, and he had a space at the top, and he had his own name, but he didn't have the number filled in yet because he wanted to beat everybody with his kill count. He was treating it like it was a video game, which means that after he shot each kid, he'd go through and shoot them in the head just to make sure. Don't you wish this teacher had claws? I'm not saying it's her fault. What she did was courageous, but it was ultimately useless. She had the will, so she had the belief. She even had the will, but there was something else that was missing, which is the capacity. If this teacher had claws, if she had the capacity to stop this person, then kids would be alive today. Whose fault is that? It's the shooter's fault. It's not her fault. It's not her fault. But imagine if she did have the ability to. A lot of people would be alive today, and that's kind of like the story of a lot of history, though. If only there was a person with the belief, the will, and the capacity who was there at the time, things would be different today. A lot of wars, a lot of tragedies would have turned out very differently if people had the claws. So he's pointing out that he's laughing at these weaklings. He's laughing at them because they walk around thinking that they're good and virtuous when they're not. They're just weak. And they reframe weakness as a virtue. And of course, now you can start to figure out that they also now reframe virtue as being bad. Because what does a weakling have to do? Can a weakling stand on their own? No. They have to join a herd. because there's safety in numbers. So they join up in groups. And then they view anybody who's not part of a group as being weird and strange. We see the kids out in the hallway who are by themselves, and they frighten us. Like, wow, that kid's weird. Haven't you noticed how he like dresses different from the rest of us? Like, there's this one dude I'm thinking of, like, wears a hoodie. I had students in my class complain that there's this weird kid who always wears a hoodie. I'm like, dude, half of you guys are wearing hoodies in here, man. Oh, but it's different. How's it different? Well, because he's by himself. Oh my God, he's by himself. Well, you know what that means. He don't like any of you. But isn't that weird how he wouldn't like us? No, maybe he wishes he was part of a group, or maybe he just doesn't like the group because he sees what the group is and what it is to be part of the group. Think about, like, you know, do you think most people are genuine, authentic, real? Don't you realize you have to be less authentic and real usually to be part of a group? And anytime we see someone who stands apart from the group, they frighten us. A person who comes along and thinks for themselves, they frighten us. When a person comes along and they don't need our approval, it frightens us, scares us. Because that's a person who's capable of acting on their own without the approval of others. We get annoyed when we see a person who doesn't like check with the group before they do things or acts without approval. And we kind of ostracize them. And some of you are already experiencing this. This happens a lot to seniors, especially second semester, as the year starts to wind down. Because people start to realize, like, well, after this year, I'm not going to be around these people anymore. And I start to see people like trail off from their friend groups because there aren't people who they would be friends with if they weren't kind of forced to be together in school. And so people start to become a little bit more solitary, a little bit more alone, which means that the people you do maintain friendships with, it's going to be a much stronger bond than like a group. You know, think about like the group dynamics. People are always complaining about how people are not real, authentic, genuine. So the herd, in order to feel better about themselves, have to make the individual sound like a bad person. They're weird. They're by themselves. They're dangerous, and we frame dangerous as being a bad thing. Like I said, I hope that all of you are capable of being very dangerous. Let's face it, you are. You're already capable of being dangerous. You're already capable of doing terrible harm. You can maximize your efforts to be dangerous and all that. You know, people who go to the gym, why? To get bigger, stronger, faster, to prove something to yourself, to develop the endurance. That's one of the reasons that we admire people who go to the gym and get stronger. But then you'll notice what like I said, 85-pound beta cucks will say, oh, he's just a meathead. Of course you would say that's a bad thing because that guy curls more than you weigh, literally. So of course you would put it in a bad way because it's the complete opposite of you. The same way that we talk about the monsters in the closet. It's the opposite of what we are when we're little kids. And so be careful. The audience is bullshit, as we've talked about. But just because you're weak doesn't mean you're good. In fact, if you're weak, I guess that's what I'm getting at. If you're weak, you're incapable of being good. If you're weak, you're incapable of being good. Because you have to be capable of doing something otherwise. The rabbit, not good. The rabbit is just what it is. It's weak, it's not able to be good. The lion has the ability to be good or bad, depending on its behavior. Questions? Comments, concerns, complaints, criticisms, critiques?